Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com. Now let's get started.
Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. I'm joined by Henry, one of our managers here. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you, Mark.
So let's get right into it. This last year, we're wrapping up. We're now in the final 3 months. It's kind of the slow down period of the year, but really it's ramping up for the next year. So what is the most frequently asked financial question that you've gotten this year?
A lot of the times it's, what can I get deduct? Or it's, what are ways that I could save money? Mm-hmm. Or how can I make more money without doing anything differently?
I feel like these are questions that I ask myself every day. And obviously it's different for everyone, right? Like every industry is different. So what are some, we'll start out with just general. What are some general things that people can do, these business owners can do to achieve basically more income without having, I don't want to say without having to do more, but what do they have to do to pull it off? Do they need to look more ahead into the future? Like, do they have to plan things out, space it out better?
One of the big things that they can do is a big thing is to make sure they're constantly checking their sales pipeline. Mm-hmm. Because if they do that, then they have an ability to pivot. So maybe your Q3 was awesome, mm-hmm. and you hired 3 more people to do your product. Okay. And you find out your product isn't going to sell so well in Q1 of next year. Now what are you going to do with those 3 people? Mm-hmm. Because you had that insight, and I know I'm keeping this very general and very basic. Mm-hmm. Now that you have that insight, you can try to figure out, either something that those people can do that's different, maybe process improvements, or you can get rid of them, which I actually have some time that I spent in financial planning and analysis, so I have been that guy that recommended, hey, maybe you got to trim a few bodies here and there.
Okay.
And I actually have some engagements where I provide this kind of advice. Mm-hmm. This is a little different than maybe your traditional CPA might do, but we do offer we'll call it CFO/controllership advisory practice. That I am kind of the beginning, the first of at
First
Kaizen.
steps. Yep. Okay.
Those looking into the future and always process improvements. So, those processes that you developed 10 years ago,
they could probably get revised, right?
There's a very good chance that they could be revised, whether it's through a software, which I know sometimes software costs a little money.
It does.
Don't be, penny foolish, pound wise, mm-hmm. or pound foolish, penny wise.
All right.
About that. A lot of times the software will make up its cost in labor.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I've seen that before because in many ways software is cheap, right?
Relative to labor.
Yes, compared to labor and the amount of labor it's saving you on. And we've seen that time and time again. And even here in just my few months here, I've seen like the amount of software that we're able to use and how much time it saves. And time is money. We all know
time
that.
Is
right?
money.
Time is
That's
money.
Right. I mean, there's not a lot of times when, you could try to predict or get, a favorable price if you switch vendors and mm-hmm. whatnot. But generally speaking, your biggest opportunity to improve your bottom line is in that labor. It's the squishiest piece.
Yep. Well, and let's just be honest here, with how much labor is, right? How many hours are you saving per week that now can be allocated differently? It's just a way to think about it, right?
Absolutely.
And yes, okay, it's not doing that exact task, but it's still providing value throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's great. So people are asking how they can basically achieve more with doing, I don't want to say less overall, but how does that actually get addressed? Like if we're thinking about it from, small business or even a larger business, how are they able to achieve that with, let's say, just looking at their numbers? If they're looking at their numbers throughout the year, what's something that they can do to kind of finagle or move things around that'll really help them out?
I guess the big thing is if you've generally got a fixed labor pool,
Okay.
you have your same 10 guys that come to your factory every single day and help you, put together the widgets and put them in a box and ship them out. But your sales go up and down. You'll notice that your gross margin is also going up and down as a result.
Okay.
The way you fix that is you either, a lot of times people come up with some kind of metric, like how many boxes am I shipping today? If you're only planning to ship 100 boxes when yesterday you shipped 200, you better make sure that, you use half the labor.
Okay, that makes sense. Everyone's got to hit their numbers, right?
And I know, especially in today's world, where the line worker is maybe a little more expensive than it used to be,
right.
And they are a little bit more. What do you call it? We'll say inclined to push their weight around a little bit more than they
used to, right?
Than they used to because of supply and demand constraints.
Yep, because of workforce. Yep.
It's still something you have to look at.
Right.
Especially if this is going to be a continuous issue going into the future.
Well, I just want to pause you for a second because we were talking a little bit about numbers and how much you're producing and all that stuff. And it reminds me because we're working with the EOS process,
sure.
even here, everyone's got a number. That's a huge thing. And I think as long as there's transparency and people know the numbers they need to hit, then really there's no problem because numbers are numbers. I mean,
correct.
You're an accountant. You should know that more than anyone, right? So if from a labor standpoint, they're hitting specific numbers, they're in a good spot. And that also provides transparency from the financial standpoint. Hey, we're producing this amount. This employee is doing X, Y, Z, and we know that we're going to be okay. Does that sound accurate?
More or less.
Okay. If I'm not, you could tell me because I'm not an accountant and I'll never claim to be.
Well, generally, like you set goals, right? Through you're doing the EOS thing, and I did this actually in a job last time. I left there 3 years ago.
Okay.
We were doing EOS, and we would have these huge scorecards, and every week we would meet, and we would, it'd be me because I was the metrics guy, I guess. Pound the operators about, hey, last week you did, cost per line of 26 cents. And you guys will not know what lines are unless you're in the fulfillment industry.
Clearly.
Or some kind of shipping or anything like that. It's actually number of lines on an invoice is what that represents.
Okay.
But now this week you're doing 30 cents. I see you burn through, some overtime this week. So how do you fix that next time? Do you call the temp agency to ask them to bring in an extra body to help you ship the lines? I mean, and these conversations would get fairly contentious and intense. But that's something, about business that I always found is very cool. Like, it's like sports and the whole competition element. That all still, survives in the business world.
Well, and really you just got to find solutions, right? It's just like what and what we're talking about is trying to find solutions for clients, right? They are, stuck in our, I guess, law like our tax code, right? And they're just trying to find the right solutions for their business, right?
Sure.
Because everyone's is playing by the same metrics, right? So they have to take advantage of the tax code that they are in.
Yep.
So now looking back, which financial trend, what happened this year that kind of caught you by surprise? Either people taking advantage of a certain tax code or something that just kind of came out of nowhere.
So we're talking financial trends or tax trends?
We'll go with both. So we'll go with
Okay.
financial first and move into tax.
All right. So financial trend, I feel like the economy suppressed later than I would have expected it to.
Okay.
With an election coming up next year, the economy just naturally suppresses.
Everyone's kind of
Every
holding
time.
on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just happens every time naturally. But, 2022 was kind of the year of the spend, and everybody was making tons of money.
Mhm.
Inflation, it was significant in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Significant
so
all
I
over
kind
the
of
place.
Saw 2023 as a year where like that would kind of all slow down drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And it has now, but the first half of the year was still a lot like 2022 was.
And now we're finally going into that, like, all right, let's pump the brakes.
Let's pump the brakes. We'll have some economic suppression, but hopefully, one thing that business owners should hope for is that the wages start to kind of reset, because especially for line workers, that's been one of the most significant inflators over the past year, 2 years. I remember back in 2015, I'm not going to say where I worked at in 2015, but we had employees making that federal minimum wage, working in a factory. And those same employees today probably make at least double what they would have made back then.
And that's got to be recouped somehow, right?
It's got to all come back together at some point.
So Henry, what's the tax trend then that you're kind of seeing? What's everyone looking at?
Well, so
or
everybody's
available.
A lot of people still want to see what is the next freebie that the government is going to put out there.
Yeah.
And it's not really happening. They've done a lot of things with like, energy efficient vehicles, doing energy efficient things at your house have been more of those kind of changes. At the state level, the last couple of years, they introduced a pass-through entity tax as a way to offset the, the SALT limitation that got imposed with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017. I know I just probably said a lot of stuff.
You totally said a ton of stuff.
But basically, prior to that act getting passed, when you ran a business and you paid out of your personal taxes, the tax for that business, you could take a deduction at the federal level for any state income taxes you paid. But when they capped it with that act at $10,000, a lot of people lost a huge deduction as a result. So a lot of the states have introduced a pass-through entity tax where you actually pay, the business will actually pay that income tax rather than the owners of the company. And this only applies for pass-through entities. So C Corps, this doesn't apply to you, but since the majority of our clientele are S Corps and partnerships, it does apply to all of them.
All right. Wow. Sounds like a lot's happening then, at least from the tax level.
It was a significant change. I mean, I think we are in a good flow on, producing the tax returns with it now, but when it came out was sometime the end of 21 and going into 2022, there was of course the challenge of trying to understand it and You know, the software, was it updated? And we had all those challenges. But I think we managed to pull through that. And, you know, it's a great deduction at this point.
So one last thing I really want to cover is what kind of advice. So again, our clients will reach out to you, say, Henry, what can we do? How can we get more? How can we pay less? Whatever. How did you address that? Is there one thing that you said, like, okay, this is my go-to solution for all these problems? What was there a process that you put in place?
It's kind of dependent on what the business does.
Because every business is different, right?
You know, for example, a real estate business is going to be significantly different than it would be for a manufacturer or you know, a warehousing operation or any of that. But again, like, you know, leverage your technology. If you don't have in-house IT staff, you know, get a third party that could fill that role for you. You know, talk to your CPA. They'll give you advice. They'll probably tell you the same thing I'm telling you right now.
All CPAs sound the same.
If you want to crank out those dollars, you know, leverage your technology. Figure out ways that you could cut the labor or make the labor more efficient or more productive. You know, it's an exciting time. I mean, we've got, you know, artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I use it even if it's something that I need a new idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hey, like, what is the
tool
conglomerate of information that
the tools are out there, right?
Right?
It's more just a question of, are people willing to do it, right? Are people willing to try out new tools and kind of go outside the box to find different ways?
And you know, I think we'll see it. One thing that you'll notice with the workforce is, you know, the baby boomer generation is really starting to phase out at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And you got the new young upstarts that, you know, especially if you go like way back in terms of, or the youngest in this grouping of age, like they were born with a cell phone in their hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've got clients that have talked to me about, you know, hey, like, this is all great, but I want to be able to manage my business from the palm of my hand. You know, pull up their financials on the phone and everything. And I think that's where it has to go. You know, I'm excited for it. And, you know, I'm happy to assist that any way I can, because unfortunately, I'm a little older than being born with a cell phone in my hand, but I try to do everything that I can from my phone if possible. So it's a convenient tool, and I'm sure, you know, you have that meeting, right, and someone asks you that Johnny on the spot question, and if you're able to pull it up on your phone real quick, you're always in a better spot.
Well, perfect. Well, Henry, is there anything else you want to add to this before we wrap up?
You know, we didn't touch too much on this, but with it being Q4, and, you know, I know you mentioned it's maybe for us the slowing down season.
Slowing down before we're about to have everyone working crazy hours.
Well, I actually have kind of a unique set of business because I do budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
And actually right now is kind of the budget period. So I'm actually busy right now.
And you're planning for everything next year.
And it's something, you know, now I know a lot of the small businesses don't get into this or don't want to get into this. But again, you know, doing this process is what can help you make that pivot decision, you know, rather than burning 6 months with that extra, you know, body or two, or that telephone bill you didn't need, or some other low-hanging fruit you have sitting on your P&L. Like, now is the time to kind of look at all that stuff before, you know, you get into next year. And also, the other thing I would caution on, just because, you brought up a little earlier today, just during chit chat, people going into next year and it's like new year, new me. And just because you have a killer Q1 doesn't mean that you can depend on that the whole year. So it's always good to, be thinking down the road and managing your risk, because factors could change, for better or for worse. Even for better, like, are you prepared to double your growth tomorrow?
That's a huge question, because it could happen.
It could happen. I know I kind of tended to lean towards the cost cutting, but there's also,
you need to be
forecasting into the future, so you know what you need in order to achieve your goals in the future.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Henry.
You have been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.